We'll get started here in a second. Just tweeting out the link. That's my current mood, or that's the current vibe, folks. The vibe is what's going on, everybody? Welcome to From Half Court for today, November 8th, 2023, live. I thought this podcast was going to be a very different occasion about 10 minutes ago than it actually is going to be. Now, I do want to preface this with this isn't going to be a ranting session. This isn't going to be a calling for anyone's job session. This is an honest conversation about where the Pistons are at, why they lost that game, where we're at right now, why we have a 6-game losing streak, and what needs to change going forward. Now, obviously I try to, approach this, like, covering the team, like obviously it started, with me being a fan, right? Like that's how any team like relationship starts. But, I try my best to stay, subjective, like especially to watch, things like last season where they only won like 17 games. You try to kind of, subdue some of the emotions. But man, full disclosure, that's one of the more painful Pistons losses I've seen in a minute. And it's really a shame because it was off the heels of some really good performances from the team, and it was such an advantage that it was such an opportunity for them to capitalize on, to snap the 5-game winning streak. Giannis getting the questionable ejection in the third quarter. It's one of those things where you don't want to come out and outright say that it's just unacceptable, but it's one of those losses where if that doesn't keep you up at night, I don't know what does, because it was absolutely there in the taking. And if I had to, if I had to kind of describe, kind of like what happened and what went wrong kind of down like the final stretch, because, Marcus Sasser was absolutely on fire. The offense for quite a bit was get the ball to Sasser. Let's, get our scores in isolation, get them the ball, set screens up top. But, you know, when Sasser got gassed because he played for like the final 15 plus minutes, and the rest of the team was going cold, there wasn't enough motion, there wasn't a lot of actual offense being set up. And that was kind of a theme a little bit throughout the night. I'd like to see a little bit more action. Guys like Sasser are really good at cutting, and we just need more of that across the board. That's something that a lot of teams need throughout the league, right? But it's just one of those things where, yeah, and I think it just comes down to this. I mean, listen, man, they were down a lot of players due to health. A lot of our shooters and key veterans are out due to health. The Bucks were also missing Giannis for the second half, and also they're missing Chris Middleton. And there's kind of no way to say it. It's like at a certain point, you have to pull through. You have to get certain games, even games that you're not necessarily supposed to win. And so it was just, I do want to pause real quick before we get too negative, or before this gets too much into a venting session, because I do want to give credit where credit is due, because Marcus Sasser had himself a hell of a night. And it's I don't agree, I don't disagree with my guy here, Pistons thoughts, that Marcus Sasser, as of right now, is looking like the steal of the draft. I mean, 26 points, 6 rebounds, 11 of 17 shooting, 3 of 7 from 3. He was absolutely phenomenal. I mean, he was nuclear in the second half, just like he said. I mean, that was one of the best scoring performances I've seen in quite a while, let alone in a Pistons uniform. It was just fun to watch. And if anything, you just wish it wasn't wasted with a loss. So that's where it's a little bit difficult. So it's one of those things where yeah, this is, it's one of those things where this team, can use this as motivation. They can bounce back. They can move forward. And, hopefully, this is something that, isn't a trend to go down the stretch this season. But I mean, you know, it's, this team about a week and a half ago, after the first 5 games, we're sitting at about 2-3. We had a really competitive loss, really competitive wins. Even our losses were really competitive. We're largely holding teams, under 109. And, down that stretch tonight, even after some of the really good play, even some of those really competitive moments, even though this is still another really competitive game, they still just couldn't pull it through. And I honestly think they just played to not lose the game down the stretch. If I had to summarize it down to one thing, I mean, you know, Cade played absolutely great. The turnovers are obviously a problem. I do, however, realize that there's only so much that Cade can do, especially when you're missing, key guys like Jaden Ivey, guys like Joe Harris, Bojan Bogdanovic, Monte Morris. Like they're missing a lot of key guys in the lineup, and just the amount of pressure that there is on Cade specifically to run the offense, to make the action happen on this team. I just think that's something that's important to remember. Now, obviously, if less turnovers, then it could possibly be a different game. But at the same time, I mean, he played 39 minutes tonight. I absolutely don't think Cade was the reason that we lost. If anything, I thought he played really good basketball. I mean, Isaiah Stewart, was great from beyond the arc as well. And I mean, he really pissed off, Giannis and got him ejected. I mean, he went cold, obviously, down the stretch, but the entire team did. You didn't get much from Sasser on the offensive end during this game, but at the same time, you're not necessarily expecting to each and every single night during his rookie year. But I mean, that block against Dame on the perimeter was great. His rebounding, yet again, continues to be stellar. He out rebounded Jalen Duren tonight, just to tell you how impressive he is. And speaking of, Jalen Duren, obviously he had that critical foul, at the end of the game, had 5 fouls, to finish the game. But, overall, still had a pretty good game, gutting it out, with his injury. But it just comes down, to those little mistakes. It comes down to the timely turnovers. It comes down to, the timely shots, and especially guys like, Brooke Lopez. I know it's tantalizing to leave a big open and let him take a three. And you generally, can try to live with that. But when it's a guy like Brooke Lopez, when we've seen time and time again how he can attack you from beyond the perimeter, even from 30 feet, man, the guy is ruthless. So seeing that shot go down was, yeah, it was absolutely painful. Yeah, and I don't think there's absolutely any other way around it. But overall, this kind of leads into kind of a general conversation I want to have, because I don't just want to spend this entire time, just talking about this one specific game. I don't want this just to be a ranting session. I don't want this to be blow it up. The team sucks. We need everybody fired. Blah, 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 blah. That's just not how I roll. If you haven't figured it out. So I've laid it out and this is kind of how I structured it in my head, so we can kind of have a straightforward conversation about where the Pistons are at and where they need to go. I laid it out as the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good, let's start with the obvious. I mean, we just talked about it a little bit right here. Marcus Sasser and Asar Thompson can both play right now. And quite frankly, I'm trying to be rational, but I genuinely do not know what Marcus Sasser's ceiling is. I mean, this guy, is the only other rookie than Victor Wembanyama to have multiple 20-point games. Victor Wembanyama, 7'5", drafted number 1 overall, generational prospect. Marcus Sasser was the 25th overall pick out of Houston at 6'2". And he's going out playing the way that he is. Absolutely phenomenal value for the Pistons. Creates a lot of complications as far as, the rotation going forward and who guys are like who's going to get certain minutes. But that's a good problem to have, because that means that you're actually having some guys that are playing for some minutes right now. And there's some good internal competition, which is always something that's pretty healthy. So in my opinion, I mean, I don't think it's a bad thing, but I'm looking forward to seeing, how Marcus Sasser continues to develop. He definitely has earned more minutes at the very least, but at the same time, I mean, even Killian Hayes over the last couple of games has been playing a little bit better. Listen, I know, with Killian in particular, it's always just going to come down to whether or not he's going to make the 3-point shot. We've talked about this a lot, right? But, with Killian tonight in particular, 14 points, 6 is 15 from the field. When he's able to run our offense and put the ball in his hands and be the playmaker that he is, coupled with the defense that he can bring on the other side of the ball, there is value there, especially with how cheap of a contract they can potentially get him on if they were to get him on an extension. But it's also one of those things where, you know, I also just don't know what his playing time looks like when Monte Morris comes back. I don't know what his playing time looks like when Jaden Ivey comes back. Like when this full team's healthy, it's going to be interesting to see how that rotation actually, lines up. Another guy who's been playing really great is Isaiah Stewart. I mean, Isaiah Stewart's been our best floor spacer, this season. He's shooting 40+% from from beyond the arc. He's been playing really well on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, he was getting hounded by people on Twitter, by fans, alike over the last few years. But I mean, let's be honest, he's a guy that a lot of winning teams would want to have on their sideline. I mean, he's a hell of a player. Now, let's talk about the bad. I just mentioned that a good thing is that Isaiah Stewart has been the best floor spacer. A bad thing is that Isaiah Stewart's been the best floor spacer because as much as we need Isaiah Stewart to be a good 3-point shooter, it's just a blow to a team that already struggling with spacing when you come in and you're already without Bojan Bogdanovic. You're without Alec Burks, who was so crucial for this team, especially when they were winning games to start this season. You're without Joe Harris as well for a couple of weeks. So, those type of injuries just absolutely stack up. And, it's one of those things where, you bring up the health and it's like, yep, you can't entirely judge this team and, until they're fully healthy. But at a certain point, you know, you need to be healthy eventually, right? So, obviously they're supposed to have that compilation of players together, towards the end of November to the beginning of December. So, trying to reserve judgment, just to wait until then. I'll be really curious to see, how things look once there is more shooting in the lineup. But that's going to be the storyline, going forward, especially as the Pistons, enter this summer, with cap space. But on top of that, going into this deadline, could the Pistons, potentially start to make moves now, to try and improve their roster? Because, even though, they could, I personally don't think this is a season where you try and dip into the lottery. I just don't think it's the juice isn't worth the squeeze on that, in my opinion. I think their best case forward is to keep trying to win games. And listen, the tough thing about it, I mean, this is a difficult schedule. Not to make excuses, this is just the reality. I mean, they played freaking Phoenix on Sunday, Golden State on Monday, Milwaukee on Wednesday. They go and play their in-season tournament game at home on Friday against Philadelphia. Like this is a brutal week. But at the same light, especially, when you have those opportunities to win, you still have to pull the trigger. And, in particular, even though tonight was, obviously close and was a little bit different, before Giannis got ejected, it was a little bit different of a game. It was about a double-digit game at that time. The Pistons before this had lost about, pretty much all of their games in the 5-game losing streak were about by 9 points or more. So, just not the best sign in the world, just seeing, those deficits early on. Again, if you're going to see a team struggle at all during the season, it's going to be at the beginning of the season. It's going to be, especially when it's a young team that's putting a lot of components together. Cade still looks phenomenal, especially, just through the first 10 games. I mean, this is already his fourth 30-point game this season. I mean, Cade Cunningham's a guy without a doubt. But they have to figure out the ancillary pieces around him. And these are the type of games where you feel the effects of the lost season last year, because you question if this team could have made different decisions and if this roster would look different if Cade was healthy and you had that sample size. You wonder if the moves that the Pistons make this past offseason would have changed if they had a little bit more certainty with what they have in their franchise players. But ultimately, you have the cards that you're dealt. You're in this situation right now. And I mean, even though you still have had multiple glimpses and a lot of flashes of the potential of what this team can be. I mean, there's been a lot of really fun moments already this season. You know, a lot of those just get overshown by the fact that those young mistakes and those bad habits of old start to kind of creep in from the last couple of years. So obviously, those are the areas where it has to improve, right? I mean, with Cade, The big thing is going to be the turnovers. He's been averaging 5.5 turnovers a game. Tonight he did have 5 turnovers as well. But I mean, listen, he has the ball in his hands as much as he is. I know, people are worried about the turnovers. I know people, are concerned on, like whether or not they're careless. I mean, I think, Cade has an immensely high basketball IQ. The biggest worry with that is if he was doing it with this team, with all of its spacing, because when you see that this team isn't making shots and when teams are not necessarily worried about the spacing, they essentially can collapse in on Cade when he's driving into the interior. And that's essentially that how do you not turn it over to a certain extent when you're facing those when you're facing those types of situations, especially when you're going against a team that has freaking Giannis and Brook Lopez on the court at the same time. I mean, that's gonna be a hell of a problem for anybody. But in the same light, turnovers are definitely going to be the kryptonite to a team those are the mistakes that you can't afford to make, like especially when you're going against the class of the league. So again, still have all the faith in the world in him. I mean, Cade is, absolutely, Cade is absolutely phenomenal. So not really worried about him. The ugly, obviously, the way we lost that game was absolutely ugly. Multiple games of 9+ point losses have not been great. The foul disparity has really been a thing. In particular, the officiating has just been bizarre this entire season. Not just against the Pistons, just league wide. I think the Giannis technical fouls, were kind of indicative of the fact that, we do kind of have an officiating issue right now in the league. There is something that needs to be kind of reevaluated. I mean, it's kind of something across all of sports, right? It is something, and I do wonder how much of it is how reactionary we can be, how much we have access to things at our fingertips that we just immediately can see, the eagle sky view from our homes. It's like, oh, clearly that's a foul, or clearly that's a missed call. Like we can see it a lot more than in the past. But I mean, at the same time, like the amount of travels called tonight, the amount of controversial calls just throughout the season as a whole, it's been questionable to say it kindly. So haven't been in love with the officiating at thus far. They're currently 30th in the league in fouls. So, kind of one of the things that Monty's talked about that, they're going to kind of have to learn as this season goes on is, especially their brand of basketball is physicality. And the biggest thing is if you're playing with physicality, you can't foul. I mean, you can't let them get 3 points at the free throw line. You have to find that, you kind of have to find out how to get physical, not get physical over the legal limit. Not to get to that point where you're causing too many fouls or you're causing my throat is killing me. But I'm going to get something to drink real quick. I'll be right back. I mean, what good is a podcaster if you can't talk, right? Kind of counterintuitive. What was I even talking about? It doesn't matter. Oh yes, the Pistons and the foul issue. Talking about how they need to foul and kind of foul like up to the legal limit. And this team's obviously struggled with that on both sides of the ball. I mean, it's not just defensively. I mean, they're struggling with screens in certain places. I mean, there was that really untimely, screen from Jalen Duren tonight, but I mean, that's kind of, a reoccurring issue. I mean, he's a great big. And I mean, when he's on, he absolutely shows that he can be one of the best bigs in this league. But at the same time, he's asked to do a very difficult job and to play with a very difficult margin, very low margin for error. So, definitely am empathetic to that. But at the same time, those are going to be the things that can cost you games. So overall, I'm still not overly worried. Do I think it's time to be like hammering the panic button? I don't necessarily think so, but I mean, listen, I as someone that is a firm believer in Troy Weaver, and as much as I firmly believe in the vision and the direction of where this team is heading, and granted, they're definitely feeling the effects of all the injuries and the health right now, but there definitely is something to be said about how this team can better be constructed to fit the vision of defending like Monty wants to and defending like Troy wants to, but at the same light can still space the floor, because those are the things that are going to be the Achilles heel for this Pistons team, especially if they can't consistently keep guys on the floor. And obviously these are nights in particular too, where you feel the miss, like where especially the absence, in the first half, you felt the absence of Jaden Ivey and the explosion that he can bring on the offensive side of the ball. I know there's a lot of things being made about the comments from Brian Windhorst, where he's talking about he's not sure, how happy that he is, with not starting. I mean, breaking news: players want to start. We now go live with the details. I mean, we just saw the Warriors. They essentially had to coddle Chris Paul all summer into like, no, he's gonna start, and they pretty much had to suck the first 4 or 5 games of the season just for him to finally come to the realization, oh yeah, this is only gonna work if I come off the bench, right? Like, and with Jaden Ivey in particular, still in year 2. Again, something that is really important to remember, something that Greg Kelser said towards the end of the broadcast. Marcus Sasser is older than Killian Hayes, Cade Cunningham, Asar Thompson, Jalen Duren, like Jaden Ivey. Like, he's literally older than almost all of our young core, and he's a rookie. So, like, just to remind you how young these guys are. So, obviously you see the comments of people putting him on the trading block and people already saying that, he's gone. I don't think that's the case at all. I definitely think that, currently the team has, as clearly not drafted for fit, which you don't draft for fit when you're in a rebuild, when you're trying to, build up a program from the bottom, right? But at the same time, these are kind of the growing pains that you do experience. These are kind of the awkward phases that you go through of how do you assemble the team? How do you how do you put these guys out on the court, and what does that look like? And obviously I didn't expect Jaden Ivey to only be getting about 20 minutes a game. I don't know how much that will continue. Obviously, hope he comes back soon from his illness, but I still think that there's a very bright future ahead or Jaden Ivey. I still think that he's one of the bright young stars that this league, has. And, even though, there hasn't been a lot of consistency from Jaden Ivey to start this season, I think when he comes back to the lineup as well, that jolt of energy off the bench is going to be something that helps this team massively. But, as far as like what changes, what adjustments does this team to make? What like needs to make? I mean, the obvious things that you look at as like the first tangible things that they can change is their lineup, right? I mean, they can make different changes to their rotation. Is it the time, to bring Marcus Sasser, into the starting lineup and to move Killian Hayes to the bench? I personally don't know how much that's going to change, and I don't know how that's going to change their fate over the long term. But I do think that it's absolutely worth experimenting with. I mean, ultimately, they need to find a way to get Cade as much spacing as possible. And also, he needs some additional help scoring. And as much as Killian has started to kind of piece things together over the last couple of games, he's just not that scoring threat consistently. He's just not that floor spacer. At least he hasn't shown to be. And so I definitely think that's something that can't hurt him whatsoever. Now, obviously, the cavalry is not coming tomorrow. And they are currently at a 6-game losing streak, going home against Philadelphia, who just beat Boston tonight, who's one of the best teams in the league, with Joel Embiid, who's the MVP. It's highly possible that this can be a 7-game losing streak. And I know that it's very easy to slip into thinking that this season is just like last season, or it's going to be just like last season. But I encourage you to look at the positives of what this team has done. And even though they are losing games, this is a far more, talented collection of players just with the addition of Asar Thompson and with the addition of Marcus Sasser alone. And listen, if there's anything that gives me solace over losses like this, like if that fourth quarter is why Milwaukee went and traded for Dame, the ending of that game is why the Pistons went and went and pursued Monty Williams as heavily as they did. Because Monty Williams is the perfect coach to have in your locker room when you endure that kind of loss. Ashton said it best, man. Those losses hurt like a mother. But at the same time, I think we have the best possible coach in that locker room who has experience in this league, who has been on the court and can speak from experience and say, we lost that one. We can only blame ourselves. And ultimately, you know, that is one of the best coaches in the league. Obviously, I know people are going to look at the last couple of minutes. I know people are going to, ridicule and look at every single small little thing. But just through the first 9 games, there is a lot of reason to be optimistic about where they're at. I mean, Cade was sensational, especially in the second half. From the second through the fourth quarter, Cade Cunningham was on a different level, and he was the best player on the court tonight. I mean, Marcus Sasser had the best stretch, but Cade Cunningham, throughout the entirety of the game, was the best player on the court. So it's one of those things. And I mean, Broder, yeah, you said it right. Still all the faith on Coach Monty. It's just going to be a little longer than people may have expected or hoped for. I mean, absolutely. And, again, not to give, reality checks, not to talk about why they're in the situation that they're in and, keep mulling and keep rehashing the mistakes and the misfortunes that this franchise has had in the past. But when you make the mistakes that the Pistons have made over the course of the 2010s, over the course of the late 2000s, those mistakes compound. They get into a situation where, you're where you're at right now, where even though we still have a lot of talent, we don't have the pool of resources that a Oklahoma City or an Orlando or even a team like Utah who's struggling like us right now can pull on from all of the trades that they were able to make, all the metric ton of picks. But even then, even despite all of that, there's still a lot of reason to be optimistic. So I know that loss absolutely hurt, but I still think that the Pistons have a really good chance to do something this season. I'm also curious to see how they respond in what Friday's going to be like for them with the in-season tournament, because even though right now they're towards the bottom of the East in the standings, even though they're in a little bit of a losing streak, they do have an opportunity to play some meaningful basketball on Friday. I mean, even though this is still a regular season game, it still counts towards the ultimate goal, which is, to get to the playoffs, which is to, win a championship, which, even though this season's about development, we're not looking at the championship. You get my point. The in-season tournament is still something that can be of value. And I think in particular, it's something that we can see be really valuable for these young teams. Because for one, no matter what, the Pistons will have had high-stake basketball games that have some form of consequence to start the season. And they can be in those pressure situations and they can learn and be better from those. And I think in particular, you already were going to have a team that was going to be extra motivated on Friday, especially after a game like this, let alone the stakes that there are, the opportunity to upset a team like Philly and potentially, ruin their opportunity to get the ticket to Vegas. There's a lot of reason for this team to be motivated, especially after tonight. But at the same time, it's an opportunity also for other teams throughout the league, not just the Pistons. I look at, Oklahoma City. This would be a great chance for them to be able to go and do some really good things. The Orlando Magic have been really good to start. I mean, Anthony Black as a rookie as well has been really good. Jalen Suggs has been playing with a lot of energy. Like the thing is, Paulo hasn't even been that good yet. And the Orlando Magic have still been piecing it together. So a lot to be impressed of, a lot to be looking forward to. And by the way, I thought last Friday the in-season tournament games, the first slate, that was some of the most fun I've had watching regular season basketball in a minute. Like the stakes of those games, the elevation of the consequences, the different courts, even though the Bulls one was ugly, which I mean, listen, the Bulls already are hard to look at this year, let alone making me have to look at that ugly court was absolutely cringe. But at the same time, the level of hoops throughout the entire night was fantastic. So I'm excited to see the matchup of Jalen Duren versus Joel Embiid on Friday. I mean, to see, the present versus the future at the big man spot is going to be a really fun watch, a really good opportunity. But at the same light, I mean, this team, we talk about changes, what needs to happen going forward. I mean, we know what this team can bring on the defensive side each and every single night. And we know the inconsistencies that we're dealing with through our lineups with the health issues. But there are two things that you can control, and that is your effort, or that is your intensity, I should say. I don't like calling out players on their effort because, guys go out and have to play against the best players in the world each and every night. The intensity that they bring to each and every game, and the amount that you keep your head in the game, the discipline that you bring to the game. Specifically the turnovers, the fouls. The big thing is controlling the things that you can control, because the whistles, that's something you can't predict. And especially when you have a young team, that's more than likely not going to go your way. The 50-50 balls, you can't really count on those. You can't really hope for guys like Damian Lillard, Brook Lopez to miss shots, because a lot of times that's not quite going to happen. I mean, especially in games like this, when you have an elevated lead, when you have a significant opportunity to come out with a win, you have to execute the basics. And that's the difference between the decent teams, the good teams, and the great teams, is the fundamentals. It's the little stuff, especially when you're talking about the 250 plus greatest players in the world. It all comes down to fundamentals. And this team absolutely has a really high ceiling. I still firmly believe that this team can be in playing contention, especially going down the stretch this season. But if they're going to get there, it's going to have to start with consistency on both sides of the ball. It's going to have to start with taking care of the ball. It's going to have to start with different, different sets, some different adjustments on the offensive side of the basketball, specifically, a little less stagnation. We need, more cutting outside of a guy like a Sar Thompson. Marcus Sasser was a freaking microwave and absolutely electric in the second half. But when you have those moments when guys absolutely go off and those guys get cold, you need someone that can come in and anchor and save the day, so to speak. Granted, it's important to remember that the Pistons have a 20-plus point a game scorer that was essentially a 50, 40, 90 guy last year. That will be coming back at the end of November, beginning of December. But still, to survive and to not to have the season perhaps be too out of reach by the point that those guys return, I mean, it's going to have to be done on the defensive end, and it's going to have to be done with taking care of the ball. And I still firmly believe, again, that they have a lot of the right players to do it in-house. But I mean, yeah, let's be real, man. That was a difficult loss. Overall, I think this has been a really fun season so far. Even if even if there has been some pain, even if there has been some difficulties, but there's still some really good storylines and some things to watch, as the season goes on. I mean, Cade has put on an all-star like campaign. He's looked absolutely like the number one pick that we thought he would be, and more. And if there's been any questions about whether or not that Cade Cunningham was going to be healthy, or what his minutes were going to look like, I mean, that dude played freaking 39 minutes tonight. He literally got breaks to wipe some sweat off his forehead and to get some drinks of water. That's it. So, I mean, he's putting it absolutely all out there. And for being gone off the court for about a year, he looks phenomenal. So I'm just excited to see what Cade looks like as the season goes on. I think this can potentially be akin to the Lions start last season, where they came out 1-6. It looks absolutely grim, but you still believe in the people that you have in house. You still believe in the direction of the organization, and they're able to turn it around at a certain point of the season and end with a statement campaign. I think that's something that can still happen, especially with this team, because ultimately it's about the people that you have in house. It's about the players and the officials that you have to get it done. And I mean, listen, Monty Williams is one of the best coaches in this game. Cade Cunningham has proven to be one of the best rising young guards in this league. Sar Thompson, Draymond was just talking about how he's going to be a freaking all defensive guy like very soon. I mean, even potentially as soon as this season. I mean, the clamps that kid can put on people's unbelievable. I know we beat that drum whenever we're given the chance, but it's only because he goes out and does it each and every single night. And it looks like the Pistons got some form of certified, future player in Marcus Sasser. At the very least, that's a guy that can be in the rotation for years to come. So again, I know it's a painful night. I know this was a difficult loss. Ultimately, there's still a lot of good to look at. There's still a bright future. There's still better days ahead. You just have to clean up the little things, and you have to control the things that you can control. We will be doing some more content later this week. I do want to release some more videos tomorrow and on Friday as well. I do want to thank everyone for joining the podcast. I know this is a brutal loss. Thank you to everyone for joining the chat and venting about it with me. If, I would love to know your thoughts on this game and, just on this season in general in the comment section down below. What changes would you like to see in the lineup? Special shout out, to people like Chuck. I want to give love to Dominique. He's been a member on the channel for 17 months. Just showing love and support from absolute day one. I just want to give, some love to everyone in the comments. Thank you so much for guys like Booner. Absolute love to guys like Ashton the trainer for everything that he's doing for the city of Detroit. You absolutely have to show love to him. But also be sure you follow my guys on social media. Be sure you check out my guy Jeff on the Morning Woodward Show Monday through Friday. He will be back on the pod next week as well. But guys, that's going to do it for this week. Thanks for listening. Catch you guys next time from Half Court. Be sure you're subscribed.